Hi guys, I'm Mai-Linh Dovan, certified athletic therapist and founder of Rehab-U Movement and Performance Therapy. Welcome to our YouTube channel. This week we're going to talk about using wedges to optimize your ankle rehab. Now, we know ankle sprains are a common injury. Lateral ankle sprains are a common injury in sports. We have Virg here who's had actually several ankle sprains. Now, sometimes normally with ankle sprain rehab, initially or earlier in the rehab process, you'd be concerned with restoring mobility, restoring end ranges of motion especially. So end range dorsiflexion, end range plantar flexion, right? Hey guys, thanks for watching our videos and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. With Virg, who's had several ankle sprains, she's actually got a lot of laxity. So you can see that she doesn't have a range of motion problem, okay? We don't need to work on end range plantar flexion or inversion with her. She's got plenty of room there. I can almost make that lateral malleolus a fulcrum and just bring that foot, plantar aspect of the foot all the way inside. So she doesn't need range of motion work. She doesn't need end range plantar flexion work, end range dorsiflexion work either, okay? What she does need in her mobilization sequence is for us to work on proprioception. And when someone has a lot of range like that, what I like to do is bring her in a vulnerable position. So bring her in her end ranges and do my proprioception work from there. I'm trying to populate those specific ranges of motion. So this is where our wedges come into play. So what we're going to do first for Virg in the mobilization sequence is we're going to get her in a little bit of an inversion position. Now we don't want to get her too much in inversion. We don't want to put her in a dangerous position, but see how we're using the wedge to get her into a little bit of inversion. And from there, we're going to do an object tracking exercise where we're stimulating the visual and vestibular system. So she's crossing that ball overhead, following it with her eyes and following it with her head. And you can see how that challenged her stability, and we've put her in that vulnerable position. So just enough inversion that she's not going to roll over on that ankle. We don't want to injure her, right? But just getting her into that position. So that's what we would do for her in her mobilization sequence. Now in her activation sequence, again, we want to work on end ranges of motion. And that's the thing that's lacking with a lot of people who have had many ankle sprains and have kind of chronic ankle instability. They're missing that end range plantar flexion strength. So what we can do is we can use the wedge and get her in plantar flexion. And from there, she's doing a calf raise. And we're going to do repeated isometric holds here. So she's going to hold there for 10 seconds or until she gets a calf cramp, which often does happen. And then she can take a break from there for 5 to 10 seconds, and she'll do repeated isometric holds, so 5 times 10 seconds. If we were really mean, we even would have had the extra wedge and had her in even more plantar flexion, and from there she does a calf raise. Maybe I'm just trying to get a calf cramp now, okay? And then, because she's got a lot of inversion, we want to strengthen that lateral aspect of the ankle. So let's get her again in an inverted position and get her to do an eversion raise. So now she's starting from inversion and working up and into eversion, okay? Plantar flexion and eversion, which are little ranges that we often forget to work. We've done calf raises, we've done plantar flexion, but we forgot to integrate those end ranges of motion. And with Virg, we're very concerned with that because she's got so much of that range of motion. So those are things we would do in her activation sequence. Again, repeated isometrics, so 5 times 10 seconds, calf cramp, or until she gets a calf cramp. Then in her integration sequence, again, we're going to use the wedge to load her in a vulnerable position. So in this instance, we're going to get her again in an inverted position, and we're going to, let me just grab a weight. Have her do a functional reach, so she's reaching over and back up. So it's a bit of a lunge variation. It's a functional reach, she's reaching over, and I could have her default even more to the front of that foot. So she's getting into that inversion position. She's loading that inverted position. Okay, so I've just used an exercise and used a wedge to get her into a more vulnerable position and load her in that position. So loaded integration exercise. Then of course we want to work on something dynamic, where her center of gravity is rapidly displaced laterally, right? Getting her into that inversion position, and she's controlling that and getting out of that position. So we can do banded lateral jumps. So with the resistance pulling her, right, in the direction that we want, she's gonna land and jump. Yes. She's too powerful. Land and jump. Land and jump. And then quick reactions. Yes, there we go. All right, so we use extra resistance to pull her even more in that affected plane, in that direction, that vulnerable direction that we want to pull her into. Okay, so that was a progression that allowed you to see what we would do in the mobilization sequence, what we would do in the activation sequence, what we would do in the integration sequence. So what we do for, in Virgie's case, not range of motion, but motor control and proprioception, what we do to strengthen those end range or activate muscles in those end ranges, and then what we do to put her under load in those vulnerable positions, load and dynamic. Okay, so hopefully that gives you some ideas on how to use wedges to optimize your ankle rehab, in the sense that oftentimes we need to get athletes in those vulnerable ranges. We need to get them beyond the ranges that we're used to working with, and having that inclination, using those wedges, is super helpful to get into those little areas that we're typically not getting into. So guys, if you're working with athletes who have had chronic ankle sprains as well and you found this video helpful, please do let me know in the comments, and we'll see you in our next video.